I just want to see my balance.
And the billionaire behind her erupted into laughter so vicious that heads turned across the marble floor of Carrington Private Reserve, his voice booming through the cathedral-high ceilings, as he told the teller not to waste precious time on someone who probably had $17 and change to her name. The morning had started the way every Thursday morning, started for the past 3 years. Maid Johnson clocked in at 6:45, exactly 15 minutes before her shift officially began at Carrington Private Reserve, a banking institution so exclusive it didn't advertise, didn't have a public phone number, and required appointments scheduled minimum 2 weeks in advance. She entered through the service entrance on Alameda Street, swiped her building maintenance badge, and took the freight elevator to the 3rd floor, where the employee locker room sat, wedged between the executive kitchen and the industrial laundry facility. Her uniform hung in locker 47, the same locker she'd been assigned on her first day. Navy blue polo shirt with the building services logo embroidered on the left breast, matching navy pants with reinforced knees, non-slip black shoes that had cost her $70 3 months ago and were already wearing through at the heel. She changed quickly, folding her street clothes with precision, a habit drilled into her so deeply she couldn't break it even if she tried. Her father had taught her that. Clothes folded in crisp rectangles, corners sharp enough to satisfy an inspection. He'd been dead for 11 years now, but his voice still lived in her head during these small moments. "Squared away," he would have said. "Keep yourself squared away, and the world can't touch you." Maya pulled her thick black hair into a tight bun, secured it with bobby pins, and checked her reflection in the narrow mirror mounted inside her locker door. 34 years old. Dark brown skin that rarely saw enough sunlight. Eyes that had learned to look down, to stay neutral, to avoid drawing attention. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to look like. Invisible, forgettable. Just another member of the service staff, keeping the Temple of Wealth running smoothly. The Carrington Private Reserve occupied the top 12 floors of a 40-story tower in downtown Los Angeles. The building itself was a monument to discretion. Tinted windows, understated signage, security that could spot a fake Rolex from 50 yards, and had the authority to deny entry to anyone who didn't meet the institution's standards. The bank served approximately 2,000 clients worldwide, each of whom maintained account balances that started at $25 million and climbed from there into territories that required specialized financial instruments and offshore structuring. Maya didn't pretend to understand. She was hired to clean. That was the extent of her relationship with this world. She pushed her cart through corridors lined with original Rothko paintings and Noguchi sculptures, emptied trash cans that sometimes contained crumpled papers detailing transactions worth more than entire neighborhoods, and wiped down conference tables where decisions were made that could topple currencies. The clients rarely looked at her. When they did, their eyes passed over her the way eyes pass over furniture. She was part of the environment, necessary but beneath notice. Her supervisor, a thin white woman named Patricia Ventura, who managed the entire facilities team with the intensity of a prison warden, handed out assignments every morning from a small office near the loading dock. Patricia had worked at Carrington for 19 years and treated the building like sacred ground. She knew every stain on every carpet, every scuff on every baseboard, every fingerprint that dared appear on the brass fixtures in the executive washrooms. She ran her team with military efficiency, which Maya appreciated and had exactly zero tolerance for mistakes, which Maya also appreciated because it meant the standards were clear. "Johnson," Patricia said, barely looking up from her clipboard. "You've got the West Wing today. All 5 executive banking floors. Trash, surfaces, restocking. Mr. Holloway is bringing in a party of 8 at 11, so I need the Pinnacle Suite pristine by 10:30. The ventilation system was acting up yesterday on 47, so check the air quality when you're up there. If it smells like anything other than filtered air, call maintenance." Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "There's a reception on 43 this afternoon. City council members, apparently. Some kind of economic development presentation. Stay out of sight once they start arriving. You know the drill." "Yes, ma'am." Patricia finally looked up. "You've been here 3 years now. Never missed a day. Never had a complaint. Keep it that way." "Yes, ma'am." Maya took her cart, a industrial-grade cleaning station loaded with microfiber cloths, pH-neutral surface cleaners, trash bags, restocking supplies for the beverage stations, and headed toward the service elevator. The cart's wheels needed oil. They squeaked faintly on the polished concrete floor. She made a mental note to handle it herself during her break. Maintenance would take 3 days to get around to it, and Patricia would notice the noise before then. The executive banking floors were different from the lobby levels, quieter. The carpet was thicker, absorbing sound until conversations took on a hushed confessional quality. The lighting was warmer, designed to make people feel comfortable discussing their wealth. Each floor had a different color scheme, subtle variations of cream and gold and deep blue, and the art rotated quarterly based on collections the bank borrowed from private museums. This month, the 43rd floor featured American modernism. The 44th showcased European portraiture from the 1920s. The 45th had abstract expressionism that Maya personally found chaotic, but cleaned around carefully because each piece was apparently worth enough to pay her salary for the next 200 years. She started on 43, working methodically through the public spaces. The reception area had 4 seating clusters arranged around a central water feature, a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city, and a reception desk carved from a single piece of black walnut. Maya emptied the discreet trash receptacles hidden in decorative containers, wiped down the glass surface of the coffee table, checked the beverage station to ensure the espresso machine was stocked, and the selection of sparkling waters included the 3 brands clients preferred: San Pellegrino, Perrier, Topo Chico. The mini refrigerator held fresh cream in glass bottles and a selection of alternative milks: oat, almond, macadamia. She checked expiration dates, rotated stock, and made notes on her inventory sheet. The first clients began arriving around 8:30. Maya had learned to read them over the past 3 years, to understand the hierarchy of wealth by observing the details others missed. There was old money and new money, and the difference showed in 1,000 tiny ways. Old money wore suits that didn't advertise their cost. New money wore logos. Old money arrived alone or with a single assistant who carried nothing because everything had already been arranged. New money traveled with entourages. Old money spoke quietly. New money performed. She was restocking the paper towels in the executive washroom when she heard him. The voice carried through the hallway with a kind of volume that suggested its owner had never been told to lower it. Booming, confident, demanding attention. Told them I wasn't interested in anything under 8% returns, and they came back with projections showing 12. 12. I nearly died laughing. These fund managers, they think we're idiots. They think we don't run our own numbers. Maya finished with the towels and pushed her cart back into the hallway, keeping her eyes down, moving toward the next section of the floor. The voice belonged to a white man in his early 60s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost $15,000. His hair was silver and styled with the kind of casual precision that required daily professional attention. He wore a Patek Philippe watch that Maya recognized because one of the other cleaners, an older Vietnamese woman named Lin, collected watch catalogs and could identify timepieces the way bird watchers identified species. That particular model retailed for $400,000. He walked with 3 other men orbiting him like moons, all of them laughing at intervals that suggested obligation rather than genuine amusement. Mr. Ashford, one of the bank's relationship managers, a polished woman in her 40s named Stephanie, appeared from a side office. "Welcome. We have the Pinnacle Suite ready for you. Your team from Singapore is already on the video conference line." "Excellent. Tell them I'll be there in 5. I need coffee first. Real coffee, not that automated garbage." Maya continued past them, heading toward the beverage station to check if it needed attention before the mid-morning rush. She'd learned that timing was everything in this job. Anticipate needs before they arose. Stay ahead of the mess. Be gone before people noticed you were there. She was wiping down the counter when Ashford approached, still talking, his voice filling the space like smoke. The problem with most wealth managers is they don't understand velocity. Money sitting still is dying money. You have to keep it moving, keep it working. I've got 17 different revenue streams right now, and I'm looking to add 3 more before the quarter ends. Maya kept her head down and worked quickly, trying to finish before he needed the station. But he stepped up to the espresso machine while she was still there, didn't acknowledge her presence, and reached past her to grab a cup. "Excuse me," she said quietly, stepping aside. He didn't respond, didn't even glance in her direction. She might as well have been a coat rack. He made his espresso, double shot, added a splash of cream, and walked away mid-sentence, continuing his performance for his audience. Maya finished cleaning and moved on to the next area. This was normal. This was every day. The invisible dance between the people who occupied space and the people who maintained it. She'd worked service jobs since she was 16, had cleaned houses and hotel rooms and office buildings, and the dynamic was always the same. Some people said, "Please and thank you." Most people looked through you. A few people went out of their way to remind you of your place. Her father had worked private security before joining the Navy. He'd told her stories about that world, about standing post at wealthy estates and corporate offices, about being essential but unseen. "You become furniture to them, Maya Bear," he'd said. "But you watch and you learn. You see how they move, how they think. Knowledge is power, even if you never use it." She'd been 12 when he told her that. 23 when he died, 34 now, still carrying his lessons like stones in her pocket. Heavy, but grounding. The morning progressed in its usual rhythm. Maya cleaned 3 conference rooms, 2 executive offices, and the small library on 44 where clients could sit and pretend to read first editions of Hemingway and Fitzgerald while they waited for their appointments. She restocked supplies, checked soap dispensers, and made sure the temperature in each room matched the specifications Patricia had drilled into the entire team. 68 degrees in conference rooms, 70 in waiting areas, 72 in the library. Around 10:15, she took her morning break. 15 minutes, as mandated by California labor law. She normally spent it in the service corridor, sitting on an overturned supply bucket, eating a protein bar, and scrolling through her phone. But today she had something else to do. Something that had been sitting in the back of her mind for 3 weeks now, growing heavier with each day she ignored it. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday. Official government envelope, Department of Defense seal. Her first instinct had been panic, because official letters from the DoD never brought good news. But when she opened it, the contents were stranger than anything she'd expected. It was from the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, requesting she contact them regarding unclaimed survivor benefits related to her father's service. The letter included a case number, a phone number, and a suggestion that she visit any military finance office or contact her nearest banking institution to verify her identity and access information about her account. She'd called the number twice. Both times she'd been transferred through 3 different offices and eventually reached someone who told her she needed to appear in person with proper identification to access the details. They wouldn't tell her anything over the phone. Security protocols, they said. She'd need to verify her identity through multiple forms of documentation. Maya didn't have time to drive out to the closest military finance office, which was in San Pedro, a 40-minute drive in good traffic, and an hour and a half in normal traffic. She worked 6 days a week at Carrington, and on her 1 day off, she picked up shifts at a catering company to cover the gap between her rent and her other expenses. Los Angeles wasn't designed for people earning $17 an hour. Every month was a mathematical puzzle. Rent was $1,900 for a studio in Echo Park. Utilities were another $150. Groceries were $400 if she was careful. Transit pass was $100. Her phone bill was $80. Car insurance was $220 because her credit score was damaged from medical bills after her father died, and she'd had to cover his final expenses. She had $1,600 in her personal checking account and another $800 in savings. The savings account was supposed to be for emergencies, but emergencies happened every 3 months like clockwork, so the balance never grew. The letter said she had survivor benefits waiting. She'd assumed it was maybe a few $1,000s, some kind of death benefit that had been lost in processing. Her father had been medically retired from the Navy after his final deployment, had worked private security for 3 years after that, and had died of a heart attack at 47. She'd been 23, finishing community college, working 2 jobs. The Navy had sent a casualty assistance officer who'd helped her navigate the immediate aftermath, had arranged the funeral at the VA cemetery, had made sure she received his flag and his service medals. But there'd been no mention of ongoing benefits, no trust fund, no secret account. Her father had lived modestly, rented a small apartment in Torrance, driven a 15-year-old pickup truck, If he'd had money hidden somewhere, he'd never mentioned it. But the letter was official, and she'd learned over the years that the military bureaucracy didn't send letters for no reason. So she decided to do what the letter suggested. Walk into a bank and ask them to help her access information about the account. Carrington Private Reserve was a bank. Not the kind of bank she would normally choose, but she was already here, and according to the paperwork, any financial institution with access to the Federal Reserve's verification system could look up her information. She'd asked Patricia if she could take her afternoon break a few minutes late, around 1:30 instead of 1, because she had a personal errand. Patricia had agreed without asking questions, which was one of the things Maya appreciated about her. She respected boundaries. At 1:30, Maya parked her cleaning cart in the service corridor, pulled off her work gloves, and smoothed down her uniform. She looked at herself in the reflection of a window, tired, underpaid, exactly like someone who cleaned toilets for a living. She almost changed her mind, almost went back to her cart and decided to deal with this on her day off, take the bus to San Pedro, handle it properly. But she'd been putting it off for 3 weeks already, and the uncertainty was eating at her. She just wanted to know. Just wanted to see if there was something there, or if the letter was a bureaucratic mistake. She took the elevator down to the main banking floor on 38. This was the level where Carrington's private banking services operated, where clients met with wealth managers and discussed trusts and estate planning and investment strategies Maya couldn't begin to comprehend. The space was designed to intimidate. 30-foot ceilings, marble imported from Italy. A chandelier that supposedly weighed 8,000 pounds and required annual cleaning by specialists who abseiled from the ceiling like mountain climbers. The furniture was arranged in intimate clusters, each positioned to suggest both openness and discretion. You could conduct business here and feel both exposed and protected. There were 6 teller windows along the far wall, though calling them windows felt wrong. They were more like stages. Each station was a small architectural moment designed to make the transaction feel significant. The tellers wore suits. They spoke in the kind of voices used by museum docents and funeral directors. Respectful, neutral, trained to handle the nervous energy of people moving enormous sums of money around the planet. Maya approached the nearest teller, a young Asian man who looked fresh out of college. His nameplate read James Chen. "Good afternoon," he said, his smile professionally, friendly. "How can I help you today?" Maya felt suddenly, acutely aware of her uniform, the navy blue that marked her as staff, the building services logo that announced she wasn't a client. She saw his eyes flick down to it, saw the micro-adjustment in his expression, still polite, but recalibrated. Different protocol for staff. "Hi," she said, her voice steady despite the discomfort crawling up her spine. "I received a letter from the Department of Defense regarding an account with survivor benefits. They said I could verify my information at any banking institution. I was hoping you could help me look it up." James Chen's professional smile held, but something shifted behind his eyes. Confusion, maybe, or uncertainty about protocol. "Do you have an account with Carrington?" "No, but the letter said any bank with access to the Federal Reserve System could pull the information. It's a government account, I think. Military benefits." He hesitated. Behind Maya, she heard voices, more clients entering. The main floor was getting busy as the lunch hour approached. James glanced past her, then back. "Can I see the letter?" Maya pulled it from her pocket, unfolded it carefully, and handed it over. James read it, his brow furrowing slightly. "Okay, this is a DFAS letter, Defense Finance and Accounting Service. They handle military pay and benefits. You're listed as a beneficiary on an account, but it doesn't specify which institution holds it. They said you could look it up using my social security number. We can certainly try. I'll need to see your ID." Maya handed over her driver's license. James looked at it, looked at her, typed something into his computer. Behind her, the voices grew louder. She recognized one of them instantly. Ashford, the man from this morning, his voice unmistakable as he held court in the middle of the marble floor, performing wealth for an audience. "Already told them I'm moving the entire portfolio to Singapore if they can't match the terms. I don't care if they've been managing my family's money for 3 generations. This is business, not a charity." James typed more slowly now, his eyes on the screen, his expression shifting from neutral confusion to something else, something Maya couldn't read. "Can you give me a moment? I need to verify some information." "Of course." He stood up, still holding her ID and the letter, and walked away from the teller station toward a door marked, "Private Banking, Authorized Personnel Only." Maya stood there, feeling increasingly conspicuous. The marble floor felt cold through her work shoes. Around her, clients moved with purpose and privilege, their clothes expensive, their posture confident. She was a smudge on a clean window, a wrong note in a symphony. Behind her, Ashford's voice grew closer. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, gentlemen. Service. Real service. You can't just show up at a Chase bank and expect them to understand your needs. You need an institution that treats wealth with respect. Carrington gets it. They understand that our time is the most valuable commodity." Maya kept her eyes forward, willing James to return quickly. "Excuse me." The voice came from directly behind her. She turned. Ashford stood there with his entourage of 3, all of them looking at her with varying degrees of impatience and curiosity. "Are you waiting for service?" Ashford asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer and found it amusing. "Yes, sir," Maya said quietly. His eyes traveled from her face to her uniform, lingering on the building services logo. His expression shifted into something between amusement and disbelief. "You work here?" "Yes, sir." "Cleaning staff?" "Yes, sir." He laughed. Actually laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. His entourage joined in, a chorus of male amusement at her expense. "And you're using a teller window during peak hours?" Maya felt heat rise in her face. "I apologize. I was told—" "This is a private bank, sweetheart. This isn't Wells Fargo. You can't just walk in and use the services. These tellers are for clients." He turned to his companions. "This is what happens when you don't enforce standards. The help starts thinking they belong here." One of the men in his entourage, a younger guy with gelled hair and a tie that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, laughed harder. "Maybe she wants to open a savings account, put away $5 a week." Ashford grinned. "I just want to see my balance," he said in a mocking, exaggerated tone that made Maya's stomach clench. "What do you think, boys? You think she's got $17 in there? Maybe 20 if it's right after payday." They all laughed. The sound echoed off the marble, drawing attention from others in the space. Maya saw heads turn, saw curiosity in the eyes of strangers. She wanted to disappear, wanted to fold in on herself until she took up no space at all. "I'm just checking on some military benefits," she said, her voice smaller now, hating how small it sounded. "Military benefits," Ashford repeated, his tone dripping with condescension. "Let me guess. Your ex-husband served a couple years, and now you're trying to squeeze out survivor payments? Classic. The system's full of people like you, gaming it for every penny." "My father—" "I don't care," Ashford cut her off. "Honestly, I don't. What I care about is that you're wasting everyone's time. These tellers have real work to do. They have real clients who move real money. You want to check your food stamp balance. Go to a regular bank." Maya's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She forced them to relax, forced her face to remain neutral. Every instinct her father had trained into her screamed at her to defend herself, to stand tall, to not accept this humiliation. But she also knew the cost of making a scene, knew that Patricia would hear about it, knew that she couldn't afford to lose this job. Rent was due in 9 days. "I'll wait," she said, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "The teller said he'd be right back." Ashford shook his head, grinning at his companions like he'd just witnessed something incredibly entertaining. "The entitlement. Unfucking believable. You people really think—" "Mr. Ashford." James had returned, but he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, older, maybe 60, with steel gray hair and a presence that commanded immediate attention. She wore a suit that made Ashford's look pedestrian, and her expression was carefully controlled, revealing nothing. "Mrs. Lancaster," Ashford said, his tone shifting instantly to something more respectful. "I was just explaining to your staff that this isn't appropriate use of client services." Mrs. Lancaster was the senior vice president of private banking at Carrington. Maya had seen her exactly 3 times in 3 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by people who deferred to her like she was royalty. She looked at Maya now, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Ms. Johnson," she said. Not a question. She knew Maya's name. "Would you mind stepping into my office for a moment?" "Yes, ma'am." "Excellent." Mrs. Lancaster turned to Ashford. Mr. Ashford, Stephanie will be with you shortly. Your conference room is ready. It wasn't a dismissal exactly, but the firmness in her tone made it clear the conversation was over. Ashford looked momentarily thrown, then recovered his smile. Of course. Thank you. Maya followed Mrs. Lancaster and James through the door marked Private Banking, down a quiet hallway lined with more art, and into a corner office that overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The office was elegant, but not ostentatious. A desk made of dark wood, 2 chairs for visitors, a small sitting area with a leather couch. Everything chosen to project competence and discretion. Mrs. Lancaster gestured to one of the chairs. Please, sit. Maya sat. James stood off to the side, holding her ID and the DFAS letter. Mrs. Lancaster settled behind her desk and looked at Maya for a long moment, her expression unreadable. James came to me because your account flagged several security protocols, she said. I'm going to be very direct with you, Ms. Johnson. The account linked to your Social Security number is not a typical military survivor benefit account. Maya's heart began to pound. I don't understand. The account is classified under a Department of Defense security designation that requires additional verification before we can disclose any details. But I can tell you that it exists, it's substantial, and you are listed as the sole beneficiary. Mrs. Lancaster paused. You said your father served? Yes, ma'am, Navy. He was a SEAL. He died 11 years ago. Something flickered in Mrs. Lancaster's eyes. What was his name? Sergeant Master Chief Marcus Johnson. Mrs. Lancaster typed something into her computer, read something on the screen, then looked back at Maya. Ms. Johnson, I need you to understand that what I'm about to show you is highly unusual. The account in question is not held at Carrington, but it is linked through the Federal Reserve System to a trust managed by the Department of Defense in partnership with USAA and several other military financial institutions. The balance is protected by the Service Members Civil Relief Act and includes accumulated death benefits, combat pay backlog, classified compensation for black operations, and survivor benefits that have been accruing interest for over a decade. Maya felt like the room was tilting. How much? Mrs. Lancaster turned her monitor so Maya could see the screen. The number displayed there made absolutely no sense. It was too large, too many digits. Maya's brain refused to process it. This can't be right, she whispered. The account is verified, Mrs. Lancaster said. Your father's service record indicates he participated in classified operations between 1998 and 2013. The compensation structure for those operations includes deferred pay, hazard bonuses, and survivor benefits calculated at a rate that's significantly higher than standard military pay. Additionally, there's a life insurance policy that was taken out through a private military contractor he worked for after retirement. That policy paid out when he died, and the funds were deposited into this trust because you were listed as his beneficiary, but the trust administrator was never able to locate you. They sent a letter to my old address, Maya said, the words coming out automatically. I moved 4 times in the first 2 years after he died. I lost track of a lot of paperwork. That's common, Mrs. Lancaster said. The DFAS has been trying to locate you for 7 years. They finally tracked you down through your current employment verification. You're in the system here at Carrington as a W-2 employee, which means your Social Security number is on file with our HR department. That triggered a flag in their system. Maya stared at the number on the screen. Her hands were shaking. What do I do? First, you verify your identity through the proper channels. I can help you initiate that process today if you'd like. You'll need to provide additional documentation, including your father's death certificate, your birth certificate, and proof of your relationship to him. Once that's verified, the funds will be transferred to an account in your name. Given the size of the balance, I'd strongly recommend you speak with a financial advisor before making any decisions about how to manage it. How much? Maya asked again, needing to hear it said out loud. Mrs. Lancaster looked at the screen, then back at Maya. $8.3 million. The office went silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. $8.3 million. The number was so absurd that Maya almost laughed. She made $35,000 a year before taxes. $8.3 million was a number that belonged to people like Ashford, People who walked into Carrington Private Reserve wearing watches worth more than cars. I clean toilets, Maya said, and she wasn't sure if she was talking to Mrs. Lancaster or herself. You did, Mrs. Lancaster corrected gently. You don't have to anymore. James, who had been silent this whole time, shifted his weight. Should I have someone bring water? She looks pale. I'm fine, Maya said automatically. Then, actually, yes, water would be good. James left. Mrs. Lancaster leaned back in her chair, studying Maya with an expression that might have been respect. I'm going to be honest with you, Ms. Johnson. What just happened out there on the floor with Mr. Ashford was unacceptable. He's a significant client, but that doesn't give him the right to humiliate our staff. I'm going to have a conversation with him about his behavior. Please don't, Maya said quickly. I can't afford to lose my job. Mrs. Lancaster's expression shifted to something that might have been sadness. Ms. Johnson, you're about to have access to $8.3 million. You don't need to worry about losing your job. I need to work until the money's actually in my account, Maya said. And even then, I don't know. My father always said not to count your money until it's in your hand. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. James returned with a bottle of water, expensive European brand from the beverage station Maya had cleaned that morning. She drank half of it in one go, feeling the cold spread through her chest. Her mind was racing, trying to process everything, trying to understand how her life had just changed in the span of 15 minutes. What do I do now? She asked. Mrs. Lancaster opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out several forms. Now, we start the verification process. It will take approximately 3 to 5 business days to process everything. Once it's confirmed, the funds will be released. In the meantime, I'm going to give you the contact information for 3 financial advisors who specialize in sudden wealth management. That's a real thing, believe it or not. People who help lottery winners, inheritance recipients, and people in your situation navigate the psychological and practical challenges of sudden wealth. I don't know if I want anyone to know, Maya said. That's your choice. But I'd encourage you to speak with at least one advisor before making any major decisions. $8.3 million is life-changing money, but it's not infinite money. With proper management, it can provide security for the rest of your life. Without proper management, it can disappear faster than you'd think possible. Maya nodded. She felt numb. Outside the window, Los Angeles sprawled out in every direction. The city where she'd been scraping by for years, working 2 jobs, rationing groceries, avoiding the dentist because she couldn't afford the copay. The city where she'd learned to be invisible, to keep her head down, to accept that she would probably never get ahead. I need to think, she said. Of course. Mrs. Lancaster slid the forms across the desk. Take these with you. Read them carefully. When you're ready, call me directly. My personal number is on my card. She handed Maya a business card, heavy cardstock with Gessi-raised lettering. Day or night, Ms. Johnson. This is important, and I want to make sure you're taken care of. Thank you, Maya said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. She left the office in a daze, forms clutched in her hand, her father's letter folded carefully in her pocket. James walked her back toward the main floor, but before they reached the door, he stopped. I'm sorry, he said, about what that man said to you. It was wrong. It's fine, Maya said automatically. It's not fine. I've worked here for 2 years, and I've seen how some of these clients treat staff. They think money gives them the right to be cruel. It doesn't. Maya looked at him, really looked at him. He was probably her age, maybe younger, earnest, trying to be kind in a world that didn't always reward kindness. Thank you, she said. Forgetting Mrs. Lancaster. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did, he said. The moment I saw that account designation, I knew this was above my pay grade. But also, I wanted her to know what happened, so she could address it. Maya nodded. She pushed through the door back onto the main floor. The space was even busier now, clients everywhere, the sound of conversations blending into a low hum of wealth and power. She saw Ashford across the room, standing near the elevators with his entourage, still talking, still performing. He saw her too. His eyes found her, and for a moment his expression flickered with something that might have been recognition or curiosity. Then he dismissed her, turning back to his audience, his voice carrying across the marble. Maya walked past him, her uniform marking her as staff, her cleaning cart waiting for her in the service corridor. She had 3 more hours left on her shift, floors to clean, trash to empty, surfaces to wipe down. She did all of it mechanically, her mind somewhere else entirely, replaying the number on Mrs. Lancaster's screen over and over until it started to feel almost real. $8.3 million. Her father's legacy. His sacrifice. His years of service in places he couldn't talk about, doing things he'd never shared with her because they were classified, because some parts of his life belonged to the government and the greater mission and couldn't be reduced to stories told at bedtime. She'd known he was important, had known his deployments were different from regular Navy deployments, had known that sometimes he would disappear for months at a time and come back different, quieter, carrying something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. But she'd never imagined this. She finished her shift. At 3:30, clocked out, changed back into her street clothes, and took the bus home to Echo Park. Her studio apartment looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Tiny, cramped. The furniture was secondhand, purchased from Facebook Marketplace and hauled up 3 flights of stairs by herself because she couldn't afford movers. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person to stand in. The bathroom had mold in the corners she'd tried and failed to scrub away. The window looked out onto the parking lot of a liquor store. This had been her life, might still be her life if the money turned out to be a mistake, if there was some bureaucratic error, if the universe decided to take back what it had briefly offered. She sat on her bed and pulled out the forms Mrs. Lancaster had given her, read through them carefully. They were requesting things she had, things she could provide. Her father's death certificate was in a folder in her closet, along with his flag and his medals and the few photographs she'd managed to keep. Her birth certificate was there too. Proof of relationship wouldn't be hard. She had his name, had her mother's name, though her mother had left when Maya was 8 and had never been part of the equation after that. She could do this, could verify, could claim what was apparently hers. But first, she needed to understand something, needed to know why. Why had her father never told her? Why had he lived modestly, worked security jobs, rented cheap apartments, if he'd known this money was waiting? Had he known? Or had it been set up without his knowledge, some black budget compensation structure that existed in paperwork but never touched the real world? She pulled out her phone and searched for information about military compensation for classified operations. Found articles about Navy SEALs, about black operations, about the hidden costs of the war on terror and the soldiers who fought in shadows. Found forums where military spouses discussed deferred pay and survivor benefits, the complicated mathematics of service and sacrifice. Found nothing that explained $8.3 million. Her phone rang, unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Johnson?" A man's voice, formal and careful. "Yes, this is Colonel David Morrison, United States Navy. I'm calling from the Naval Special Warfare Command. I understand you've been contacted by DFAS regarding your father's account." Maya's heart began to pound again. "Yes, sir." "Good. That's good. I apologize for the delay in reaching you. Your father's service created some complicated paperwork, and it took us longer than it should have to track you down. I wanted to call personally to express my condolences. I knew Marcus, served with him on 2 deployments. He was one of the best operators I ever worked with." "Thank you," Maya said, her voice thick. "I also wanted to explain a few things, if you have a moment." "I have time, Colonel." Morrison sighed, the sound heavy with something that might have been regret. "Your father participated in operations that officially don't exist, the kind of work that keeps people safe but can never be acknowledged publicly. The compensation structure for that work is classified, but the short version is this. Men like your father were paid for their service in ways that reflected the extraordinary risks they took and the value of their contribution. Some of that money was paid out during their service. Some of it was deferred into trust accounts to protect it from scrutiny and to ensure their families would be taken care of if something happened. He never told me," Maya said. "He wouldn't have been allowed to. The account's existence is classified. He knew about it, but he couldn't access it or talk about it or do anything with it until he separated from service. And when he separated, he made the decision not to touch it. Do you know why?" Maya thought about her father, about the man who had raised her alone after her mother left, about his small apartment and his old truck, and the way he'd lived like money didn't matter. He wanted to stay normal, she said. That's part of it, Colonel Morrison said. But the other part is that he wanted you to have it. He told me once that if something happened to him, he wanted to know you'd be taken care of, not just financially, but that you'd have the freedom to make your own choices. He said he didn't want to raise you with that kind of money because he wanted you to learn how to work, how to be self-sufficient. He was old school that way. Maya closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. That sounds like him? He was proud of you, Ms. Johnson, talked about you all the time, said you were tougher than any operator he knew because you'd figured out how to survive in the real world without a team or a mission or a clear enemy. That's harder, he said. That's the real fight. I don't feel tough, Maya said. No one ever does. But your father saw it in you, and I trust his judgment. He was rarely wrong about people. Colonel Morrison paused. The money is yours. No strings, no obligations. It's been earned and it's been waiting. I just wanted you to know that your father's sacrifice meant something, that the work he did saved lives, and that he wanted you to be able to live yours without the same burdens he carried. Thank you, sir, Maya said, for calling, for telling me. You're welcome. If you need anything, if you have questions, my contact information is on file with DFOS. Don't hesitate to reach out. The call ended. Maya sat in her studio apartment, surrounded by secondhand furniture and the sounds of Los Angeles filtering through thin walls, and let herself cry. For her father, for the years she'd struggled, for the life he'd lived in shadows, for the gift he'd left her that she was only now beginning to understand. The next day she went back to work. Patricia seemed surprised to see her. Thought maybe you were sick. You left pretty fast yesterday. Family matter, Maya said. It's handled. Good. I need you on 42 and 43 today. City council reception went late, and the cleaning crew they brought in for the evening shift did a half-assed job. I want it pristine before the morning clients arrive. Yes, ma'am. Maya took her cart and went to work. She cleaned with the same precision she always had, the same attention to detail, the same invisible efficiency. But something had shifted. She moved through the spaces differently, not because she felt superior or above it, but because she understood now that this was a choice. She was choosing to be here, choosing to finish what she started, choosing to honor the work ethic her father had instilled in her. Around mid-morning, she saw Ashford again. He was holding court in one of the conference rooms, visible through the glass walls, animated and loud. She cleaned the corridor outside, and when he emerged for coffee, he walked past her without a glance. Furniture again, invisible. Maya smiled to herself and kept working. That afternoon, she used her lunch break to visit Mrs. Lancaster. The older woman looked up from her desk and smiled. Ms. Johnson, I was hoping you'd come back. I have the documents, Maya said, handing over the folder. Everything you asked for. Mrs. Lancaster reviewed them carefully, nodding. This is excellent. I'll submit these today. You should have confirmation within the week. Thank you. Have you thought about what you'll do? Maya hesitated. I think I'm going to keep working, at least for a while. I don't want to make any big decisions until I've had time to think. Mrs. Lancaster's smile widened. That's wise and refreshing. Most people in your situation would have quit the moment they found out. My father didn't raise a quitter, Maya said. No, he didn't. Maya turned to leave, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Of course. That man, Ashford, the one who was rude, does he know? Mrs. Lancaster's expression became carefully neutral. Not yet, but he will. Mr. Ashford has an appointment with me later this week to discuss his accounts. I think it's time we had a conversation about respect and institutional values. I don't want him to get in trouble because of me. It's not because of you, it's because of him. He's been warned before about his behavior towards staff. This was simply the incident that made the decision clear. Mrs. Lancaster leaned forward. Ms. Johnson, this bank has existed for over 100 years. We've survived because we understand that wealth without character is meaningless. Mr. Ashford has wealth, but he lacks character. We don't need clients who treat human beings as disposable. Maya nodded. She left the office feeling lighter than she had in years. The verification process took 6 days, not 5. During that time, Maya worked her regular shifts, picked up an extra catering gig on her day off, and paid her rent on time. She also met with one of the financial advisors Mrs. Lancaster had recommended, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kimura, who specialized in sudden wealth management and treated Maya's situation with the same seriousness she would have treated a lottery winner or inheritance recipient. The first thing you need to understand, Dr. Kimura had said during their initial consultation, is that this money doesn't change who you are. It changes what you can do, but not who you are at your core. People often confuse the two, and that's when they make destructive decisions. They'd talked for 2 hours about tax implications, about investment strategies, about the psychological impact of sudden wealth, about the importance of taking time before making major changes, about the people who would emerge from the woodwork asking for loans or investments, about the need for boundaries and professional advisors and a clear long-term plan. Maya listened and took notes. She was a quick study, always had been. Her father used to say she had a tactical mind, could see patterns and assess risks better than most operators he knew. She'd always thought he was just being proud, paternal, but now she applied that same analytical approach to her new situation. On the 7th day, Mrs. Lancaster called her. "The funds have been transferred. You're now the account holder of record. I'd recommend you come in and we can walk through setting up proper financial management." Maya went in that afternoon, still wearing her uniform, still on the clock. Mrs. Lancaster introduced her to the wealth management team, a group of professionals who treated her with respect and patience, walking her through the process of structuring her accounts, setting up trusts, discussing investment portfolios. It took 3 hours. By the end, Maya's head was spinning with information about municipal bonds and dividend-yielding stocks and real estate investment trusts. "I need time," she told them. "I need to think about all of this." "Of course," the lead wealth manager, a man named Richard with kind eyes and gray hair, said. "We're here when you're ready. In the meantime, the funds are secure. They're earning interest. You're in no rush." Maya thanked them and went back to work. She finished her shift, emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces in the executive banking suites where people managed fortunes as a matter of routine. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was now one of those people, one of the invisible wealthy. She could walk away tomorrow, could quit and never work another day in her life, could buy a house and a car and travel the world. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. That evening, as she was leaving the building through the service entrance, she ran into James. He was leaving too, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, looking tired. "Hey," he said. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," Maya said. "Thank you again, for everything. I heard the transfer went through. Congratulations." "You weren't supposed to hear that." James smiled. "I work here. I hear everything. But don't worry, I'm not going to say anything. Client confidentiality applies to everyone who uses our services, including staff who turn out to be secret millionaires." Maya laughed. "I'm still not used to that word." "You will be, or you won't. Either way, I hope it gives you what you need." "What I need is to understand my father better, to know what he did and why he did it." James nodded. "Military service is complicated. My uncle was Army, did 2 tours in Iraq. He never talked about it, not really. Just said some things are too heavy to share, so you carry them alone." "That sounds right," Maya said. They walked together to the parking garage, talking about nothing important, just 2 people ending their workday. When they reached Maya's car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with rust on the bumper and a cracked windshield, James looked at it and then at her. "You're going to keep this car, aren't you?" he said. "For now," Maya said. "It still runs." "That's very grounded of you." "Or very stubborn." "Both. I think your father would approve." Maya got in her car and drove home through Los Angeles traffic, merging onto the 101 and crawling toward Echo Park at 15 miles per hour. The city glittered around her. A million stories happening simultaneously. Invisible people living invisible lives. She was one of them. Still one of them. The money hadn't changed that yet, and she wasn't sure she wanted it to. When she got home, she made dinner, the same cheap pasta she always made, and ate it while sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She thought about calling someone, telling someone, but who? She'd lost touch with most of her friends over the years, the natural attrition that happened when you worked constantly and had no time for socializing. Her extended family was small and distant, cousins she hadn't spoken to in years. Her father's military friends were strangers to her, men whose names she'd heard in stories but had never met. She was alone, had been alone for a long time. The money didn't change that either. Over the next week, Maya continued working at Carrington, and people started to notice something different about her. Not anything obvious. She still wore the same uniform, still cleaned with the same efficiency, still kept her head down. But there was something in her posture, in the way she moved through space, that had shifted. Confidence, maybe, or just the absence of the grinding stress that comes from living paycheck to paycheck. Patricia called her into the office on Friday. "You've been doing good work, Johnson. Consistent, reliable. I'm putting you up for a promotion. Building services team lead. It comes with a raise. $3 more an hour and benefits upgrade." Maya blinked. A week ago, this would have been life-changing. $3 an hour was $600 a month, enough to build. An actual emergency fund, maybe save for a better car. Now it felt almost absurd. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that." "You've earned it. Not a lot of people stick around as long as you have. Most folks see this as a stepping stone to something else. But you've committed to excellence, and that matters." "I need to think about it," Maya said. "The promotion. Can I give you an answer on Monday?" Patricia looked surprised. "Sure, take the weekend. But I don't understand the hesitation. This is a good opportunity." "I know. I just need to think." She left the office and went back to work, her mind churning. The truth was that she didn't know what she wanted anymore. The promotion was evidence that she was good at this job, that she'd built something here through persistence and competence. But it was also a reminder that this wasn't what she'd dreamed of when she was younger. She'd wanted to be a teacher, had been studying education at community college before her father died, and everything fell apart. She'd dropped out to work full-time, had told herself she'd go back eventually, but eventually had never arrived. Now it could. Now she could finish her degree, could become a teacher, could do the things she'd always wanted. The money made it possible. But the money also made her hesitant, because once she quit, once she walked away from this job and this life, there was no going back. She'd be different, changed, no longer invisible. That weekend, she drove to the VA cemetery where her father was buried. She hadn't been in months, maybe longer. Life had a way of getting in the way, of making even important things feel impossible to prioritize. She parked and walked through the rows of white headstones, each one marking a life of service, until she found his. Marcus Johnson, Sergeant Master Chief, U.S. Navy, 1967-2014, beloved father, devoted servant. Maya sat on the grass in front of his headstone and talked to him the way she had when she was a kid, when he would come home from deployment and she would tell him everything that had happened while he was gone. She told him about the money, about Ashford, about Mrs. Lancaster and the financial advisors and the impossible choice of what to do next. "I don't know what you'd want me to do," she said out loud, not caring if anyone heard. "You never told me about any of this. You just lived your life and worked your job and raised me to do the same. But now I have this gift, and I don't know if taking it means I'm honoring you or betraying everything you taught me." The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves on the trees planted at careful intervals. A jet flew overhead, leaving contrails across the blue sky. Somewhere in the distance, a funeral was happening, the sound of muffled voices carrying across the grass. "I think I'm going to quit," Maya said. "I think I'm going to go back to school, become a teacher. It's what I wanted before everything fell apart, and I think you'd be okay with that. You always said education mattered. That knowledge was the only thing no one could take from you." She stayed for another hour, sitting in silence, feeling the sun on her face. When she left, she felt lighter, decided. On Monday, she told Patricia she was declining the promotion and giving her 2 weeks' notice. Patricia looked stunned. "Did you get another job?" "No, I'm going back to school." "School? For what?" "Teaching. I want to be a teacher." Patricia studied her for a long moment. "You've been saving." "Something like that." "Well, good for you. Not many people follow through on things like that. Most folks talk about going back to school and never do it." "My father taught me to finish what I start," Maya said. "He taught you well." The 2 weeks passed quickly. Maya trained her replacement, a young woman from Guatemala, who worked with the same quiet intensity Maya recognized in herself. She cleaned her last bathroom, emptied her last trash can, and clocked out for the final time on a Friday afternoon. Patricia gave her a card signed by the whole team and a gift certificate to a restaurant Maya had never been to because it was too expensive. She accepted both with gratitude and surprise. On her way out, she stopped by Mrs. Lancaster's office. The older woman looked up from her desk and smiled. "Ms. Johnson, I heard you're leaving us." I wanted to thank you for everything." "You don't need to thank me. You deserve dignity and respect, and I'm sorry it took the revelation of your financial situation for some people to see that." Maya hesitated. "Did you talk to Ashford?" Mrs. Lancaster's smile turned sharp. "I did. He's no longer a client of this institution." Maya's eyes widened. "You closed his accounts?" "He closed them himself after I explained that his behavior violated our institutional values and that we wouldn't be able to continue serving him if it happened again. He didn't take it well. Threatened to move all his family's money, pulled the 'Do you know who I am' card. I told him I knew exactly who he was, and that was the problem." Mrs. Lancaster leaned back in her chair. "He's someone else's problem now, and good riddance. I didn't want him to lose business over me. It wasn't over you. It was over his inability to treat human beings with basic decency. That's a character flaw that manifests in many ways, and eventually it catches up with you. Better it happened here than somewhere more consequential." Maya nodded. "What will you do if you lost a client that big?" "We'll survive. We always do. The bank has existed for over a century because we've never compromised our values for the sake of short-term profits. Mr. Ashford's money will find another home, and we'll find better clients to replace him." They talked for a few more minutes about Maya's plans for school, about the scholarship program for the children of military veterans, about staying in touch. When Maya finally left, walking through the marble lobby, for the last time, she felt the weight of 3 years lifting off her shoulders. She was done being invisible. The next chapter of her life began slowly, deliberately. She enrolled at Cal State LA, applied her previous community college credits, and mapped out a path to finish her bachelor's degree in education within 2 years. She rented a better apartment, nothing extravagant, just a 1-bedroom in Silver Lake with good light and a small balcony. She bought a used car to replace the Civic, a reliable Toyota that got her from place to place without drama. She set up automatic transfers from her main account to cover living expenses, giving herself a modest monthly budget that reflected her values, not her wealth. The rest of the money stayed invested, managed by the team at Carrington under Dr. Kimura's guidance. She didn't touch it except for tuition, which she paid in full, and a donation to a scholarship fund for children of fallen SEALs, made anonymously in her father's name. She also started volunteering, one afternoon a week at a community center in East LA, helping kids with homework and reading. It reminded her why she'd wanted to be a teacher in the first place. The moment when a child understood something they'd been struggling with. The way education could open doors that seemed permanently locked. The power of someone believing in you when you didn't believe in yourself. One of the kids, a 10-year-old named Carlos, whose father was deployed overseas with the Marines, asked her why she volunteered. "My dad was in the military too," Maya said, "and he taught me that service matters, that the work you do for other people is the only work that really counts." "What did your dad do?" Carlos asked. "He protected people. That was his job. He made sure people were safe, even if they never knew his name." "That's cool. My dad protects people too. He's in Afghanistan." "I know. You told me. And I bet he's really good at it." "Do you miss your dad?" "Every day," Maya said. "But I try to honor him by doing things he'd be proud of." Carlos nodded seriously. "I'm going to do that too." That conversation stayed with Maya. It crystallized something she'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. The money was a gift, but it wasn't the point. The point was what she did with it, how she chose to live, whether she used her privilege to lift others up or to separate herself from the world. She chose to lift. Over the next 2 years, she finished her degree, graduated with honors, and got a job teaching 5th grade at a public school in Boyle Heights. The school was underfunded and overcrowded, the kind of place where teachers bought supplies with their own money and stayed late every day because the work was never done. Maya fit right in. She was good at it, better than she'd expected. The kids responded to her straightforward approach, her refusal to accept excuses, her genuine belief that they could achieve anything if they worked hard enough. She didn't. tell anyone about the money, not her colleagues, not her students, not the parents who volunteered in her classroom. She drove her modest Toyota, wore clothes from Target, brought her lunch in a reusable container. To the outside world, she was just another teacher scraping by on a public school salary, committed to her work despite the challenges. But she did use the money strategically. When students needed supplies, they appeared. When a family was struggling with rent and facing eviction, an anonymous donation covered the gap. When the school's music program was cut due to budget constraints, funding mysteriously appeared to bring it back. Maya worked through Dr. Kimura and a lawyer she'd hired to structure the donations carefully, ensuring they couldn't be traced back to her. "You're doing good work," Dr. Kimura told her during one of their quarterly reviews. "But I have to ask, are you taking care of yourself? You're living well below your means." "I'm living according to my values," Maya said. "My father didn't accumulate that money so I could buy a mansion and a yacht. He accumulated it so I could be free. And I'm using my freedom to do work that matters." Dr. Kimura smiled. "He'd be proud of you." "I hope so." 3 years after discovering the account, Maya was sitting in her classroom after school, grading papers, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Ms. Johnson?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes?" "My name is Helen Ashford. I believe you met my husband, Richard Ashford, several years ago at Carrington Private Reserve." Maya's hand tightened on the phone. "I remember. I wanted to call and apologize. I only recently learned about what happened, about how Richard treated you. It was inexcusable." Maya didn't know what to say. She waited. "Richard and I divorced last year," Helen continued. "Not because of that incident specifically, but because it was part of a pattern. He'd become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who measured worth by bank balance and treated people as disposable if they couldn't do something for him. I'm sorry you were on the receiving end of that behavior." "You don't need to apologize for him," Maya said carefully. "I know, but I wanted to. And I also wanted to tell you something. After Carrington closed his accounts, Richard's business started to unravel. It turned out he'd been cutting corners, treating partners and employees the way he treated everyone else. Eventually, people stopped wanting to work with him. His reputation became toxic. He lost clients, lost deals, lost the respect of his peers. It all caught up with him." "I'm sorry to hear that," Maya said, and meant it. "I'm not," Helen said. "He needed to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't build a life on arrogance and cruelty. I just wanted you to know that sometimes karma does come around, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For being dignified, for not engaging, when he tried to humiliate you. My daughter works at Carrington now, in their compliance department. She told me what happened afterward, how you just went back to work, how you handled the whole situation with grace. It made an impression on her, made her think about how we treat people, regardless of their position." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for calling. Thank you for being exactly who you are. The world needs more people like you." The call ended. Maya sat in her empty classroom, surrounded by posters about the water cycle and multiplication tables, and felt something shift inside her. The last piece of anger she'd been carrying about that day, about Ashford's mockery and the humiliation of being invisible, finally released. It didn't matter anymore. He'd gotten what he'd needed to learn, and she'd moved on to a life that had nothing to do with him. That evening, she drove to the cemetery again, sat in front of her father's headstone as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky orange and pink. "I'm a teacher now, Dad," she said. "A good one, I think. The kids are learning, not just math and reading, but how to think, how to question, how to understand that where they come from doesn't have to define where they go. I think that would make you proud." The wind moved through the trees. A bird called from somewhere nearby. The world kept turning. "I used the money the way you wanted me to. Not all at once, not foolishly, but strategically. To build a life that matters, to help people who need it, to be free enough to make choices based on what's right instead of what pays the bills. You gave me that freedom, Dad, and I'm trying to honor it." She stayed until dark, then drove home through the city, past the tower where Carrington Private Reserve still operated on the top 12 floors, past the neighborhoods where her students lived, past the signs advertising wealth and success and the California dream. She parked in front of her modest apartment building, climbed the stairs to her unit, and went inside. The next morning, she woke up early, made coffee, and prepared her lesson plans for the day. Her fifth graders were starting a unit on American history, focusing on unsung heroes, people who'd made a difference but weren't in the textbooks, people who'd served quietly, who'd sacrificed without recognition, who'd changed the world from positions of invisibility. She'd already picked her first example, a Navy SEAL named Marcus Johnson, who'd spent his life protecting others and had left his daughter a legacy not of wealth, but of character. Today we're going to talk about real heroes, she told her class that morning, 28 10-year-olds looking up at her with varying degrees of attention. Not the people you see in movies, not the ones with their names on buildings, but the people who do the right thing even when no one's watching, even when they get nothing in return except the knowledge that they made a difference. A hand went up. Maria, a bright kid who asked questions that made Maya think. Like who? Like my father, Maya said, and she told them the story. Not about the money, not about the account or the humiliation or the transformation, but about service, about sacrifice, about a man who'd spent his life in shadows so others could live in light. The kids listened, rapt. When she finished, Carlos raised his hand. Your dad sounds like my dad. I bet they'd have gotten along, Maya said. After school, as she was erasing the whiteboard, her principal, a tired but dedicated woman named Dr. Martinez, stopped by. I heard you talking about your father today. The kids couldn't stop talking about it at lunch. I hope that's okay. I know it was personal. It was perfect. These kids need to hear stories like that. Need to understand that heroism isn't always loud, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is serve quietly and do your job well. Dr. Martinez paused. I also wanted to tell you that the school board approved funding for the after-school tutoring program. Someone made a significant donation specifically for that purpose. We'll be able to offer free tutoring to any student who needs it starting next month. Maya kept her expression neutral. That's wonderful. It is. I don't suppose you know anything about it? Why would I know anything about it? Dr. Martinez smiled. No reason, just a hunch. Anyway, thank you for everything you do here. You're making a difference. After she left, Maya finished cleaning up her classroom and headed home. She stopped at the grocery store, bought ingredients for dinner, and was standing in the checkout line when she saw him. Ashford. He was 3 registers over, looking older, thinner, wearing jeans and a polo shirt instead of his usual expensive suit. No entourage, no performance. Just a man buying groceries like everyone else. Their eyes met across the distance. Recognition flashed in his face, followed by something that might have been shame. He looked away quickly, paid for his items, and left without looking back. Maya watched him go. Felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just the neutral observation of 2 lives that had intersected briefly and were now moving in different directions. She paid for her groceries, drove home, and made dinner. While it cooked, she checked her email and found a message from Cal State LA. They were offering her an adjunct teaching position in their education program, working with student teachers. It would mean evenings and weekends, but it was a chance to shape the next generation of educators, to pass on what she'd learned. She accepted immediately. That night, before bed, she opened her laptop and looked at her account summary. The $8.3 million had grown to $9.7 through careful investment. She'd spent less than $200,000 total over 3 years, most of it on tuition, living expenses, and anonymous donations. The rest sat there, accumulating, waiting for whatever came next. She thought about her father, about the choices he'd made, about the life he'd lived in service to something larger than himself, about the gift he'd left her, not just of money, but of example. I'm doing it right, Dad, she whispered to the empty apartment. I'm living free, but I'm staying grounded, just like you taught me. Outside, the city hummed with its million stories. Inside, Maya closed her laptop and went to bed, ready for tomorrow, ready for the next lesson, ready for whatever came next. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she wasn't performing either. She was simply herself, living according to her values, using her privilege to lift others up, honoring the legacy of a man who'd given everything so she could have choices. And that, she thought as she drifted off to sleep, was exactly what he'd wanted. The years continued to unfold. Maya taught, donated, lived modestly, and slowly began to let people in. She made friends among her colleagues, dated occasionally, and eventually met someone, a middle school history teacher named James, who had nothing to do with banking but shared her values and her commitment to education. They moved in together after 2 years, married after 4, and bought a modest house in Highland Park that they filled with books and laughter. She never told him about the money, not because she didn't trust him, but because it wasn't relevant to who they were together. He loved her for her dedication to her students, her dry sense of humor, her refusal to compromise on things that mattered. The money was background, context, not the story. On the 10th anniversary of finding out about the account, Maya was sitting in her backyard watching her twin daughters play in their inflatable pool. 5 years old, full of energy and questions, and the kind of fearlessness that came from being loved unconditionally. She'd named them after her mother and her father, Elena and Marcus, the perfect blend of the family she'd come from and the family she'd built. "Mama," Elena called out, "watch me swim." Maya watched her daughter paddle across 3 feet of water with intense concentration, her dark curls plastered to her head, her face determined. "I see you, baby. You're doing great." "I can do it too," Marcus shouted, not wanting to be left out. "I know you can. Show me." They both swam, competing and cooperating simultaneously in the way of twins. Maya's husband, James, came out with lemonade and sat beside her on the patio. "Beautiful day," he said. "It is. I got an email from the principal. The district's proposing cuts to art and music programs again. Budget shortfall." Maya sipped her lemonade. "They do this every year." "I know, but this time it might actually happen. They're talking about eliminating positions." "We'll figure something out," Maya said. That evening, after the kids were in bed, she sent an email to Dr. Kimura. "I need to set up another donation, district-wide, enough to fund art and music programs for the next 5 years. Can you structure it to look like it's coming from a foundation?" The response came back within an hour. "Of course, I'll handle it. You're giving away nearly $2 million in the last 3 years. Are you sure about this pace?" Maya wrote back, "The money's not the point. It never was. The point is what it allows me to do, and this matters. Your father would be proud." Maya closed her laptop and went to bed, curling up next to her husband, listening to the sounds of her house settling, her children breathing in their room down the hall, the ordinary miracle of a life built on values instead of wealth. She still taught 5th grade, still showed up every day with lesson plans and patience, and the belief that education could change lives. Still bought supplies with her own money when the school budget ran short. Still stayed late to help struggling students. Still treated her work like it mattered because it did. The money sat in the background, managed carefully, growing slowly, ready to be deployed when needed. It was a tool, a resource, a gift from a man who'd understood that real wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to serve, the freedom to live according to principles instead of pressures. And Maya used that freedom every single day, in her classroom, in her community, in the way she raised her daughters to understand that service mattered more than status, that character mattered more than comfort, that the work you did for others was the only work that truly counted. She was her father's daughter, and she'd built a life that honored his sacrifice not through spending or showing off or separating herself from the world, but by staying grounded, staying committed, staying true to the lessons he'd taught her in that small apartment in Torrance all those years ago. "Stay squared away," he'd said, "and the world can't touch you." She'd stayed squared away, and she'd built something beautiful in the process, not a monument to wealth, but a life of meaning, a legacy of service, a quiet revolution fought one classroom at a time, one donation at a time, one student at a time, and somewhere, in the part of her that still believed in something beyond the physical world, she felt her father's approval, felt him watching over her with pride, felt him understanding that she'd taken his gift and used it exactly as he had hoped, not to escape the world, but to engage with it more fully, more freely, more authentically. She just wanted to see her balance, and what she'd found was so much more than money. She'd found purpose, found freedom, found the ability to make choices based on values instead of survival. And that ultimately was what her father had fought for. In all those classified missions, all those dangerous operations, all those years of service that officially didn't exist, he'd fought for her freedom, for her ability to live a life that mattered, and she was living it every single day.